Hey, Gen X, let's talk about retirement. I know the R word can feel heavy, especially for us. We're the generation that's often called the sandwich generation, squeezed between caring for aging parents and supporting our kids while trying to figure out our own financial futures. It feels like the perfect storm, doesn't it? You know, there's both good and bad news, and I tend to be on the positive, so I'm gonna focus on the positive news. And the good news is that we're navigating it, and understanding it is the first step in being able to navigate it. And so today, we're going to dive into the top four retirement challenges that we as Gen Xers perceive, and more importantly, concrete steps that we can take to address them right now. Challenge number one, the pillar problem. You know, you're like 60% of Gen X. You're looking at Social Security and you're thinking to yourself, will it even be there for me? Let's be honest, traditional pensions for us, they're often a myth. They're replaced by the promise of the 401k. And we thought the 401k was going to do what the pension did for our parents, but it just didn't. And so we saw pensions disappear, and that was happening right as we're entering the workforce. And so now we just feel like we don't have certain safety net that our parents had or had. This uncertainty is real. We're not getting some of the guarantees our parents had. That creates huge anxiety about our financial situation. So here's how to address this. We have to build our own strong pillars as we continue to diversify. Assume less from Social Security. Maximize your 401k. For those of us that are 50 and over, make sure that you leverage your catch-up contributions, because I think in 2026, you can add an additional $7,500 just to catch up on your 401k, because somewhere somebody thought these folks aren't going to have enough when they retire because they're trying to figure it out on their own. So leverage that. And that can make up huge for lost time. Explore other accounts. There's one of the people that I was getting comments from today was talking about their 457, which is a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. And those non-qualified plans allow you to get paid off before you turn 62. They're not Social Security. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend that if you have the opportunity to get involved in a non-qualified deferred compensation plan, go ahead and do it, because between that and the healthcare savings account, which could save you a bunch on healthcare. Oh, and I realized I have my headphones on. That could save you a lot in healthcare. I'm just going to suggest that you go after all of those, because especially the healthcare savings accounts, those are after tax dollars, and they don't get taxed when they're used or any of that, and they grow tax free. The other thing I would suggest, and this is the process that I'm in right now, so I'm just keeping it a buck with you, educating myself on Social Security, the optimization around that. When I went through the process of talking about the retirement and we started going through those steps, the idea was, take it at 70 and my wife will take it at 62 because it appeared my numbers were higher. But what I'm starting to quickly realize that what I need to do is make sure that I continue to stay on top of the information, because the information is changing, it's evolving, and I want to be on top of that information. The information is publicly available. I just need to make sure that I'm on top of it, because Social Security ties into a bunch of stuff. It's not just disability, it's not just getting Social Security payments, but it also deals with Medicare and all of that. Once you get into that path, talk to anybody you know that's retired, that's some complicated stuff. Next up, in terms of challenges, is the financial vortex. We're getting pulled in every direction. More than half of us are supporting our parents, our adult children, and a lot of us are supporting both. And in fact, we're even paying off our own student loans. So we got to make sure that we're on top of everything. It's, as they say, the perfect storm. Forget the perfect. It's a storm. And it seems like every time we solve one thing, there's something else that comes up. Every time you think, okay, I could breathe, or is that, what's that song? Breathe again. breathe again with Tony Braxton, then something else happens. And as a Generation Xer, we're used to that, but it's exhausting and it really derails our plans because we end up spending a bunch of time thinking about that when we probably shouldn't. So then the question becomes, what's the key to escaping the vortex? And it takes really a few things: strategic prioritization, ruthless debt demolition. So let me walk through this for you so you get an understanding of what I'm saying. I'll start with what I call the oxygen mask rule. And they say when you're on an airplane that you put on your own oxygen mask first. Well, it's funny because when you look at the rest of our lives, most of the time we take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And the reality is we need to take care of ourselves, make sure we're at least saving for retirement. So when the time comes, we're in a place to do it. So make sure you take care of yourself financially before you go down the path of trying to take care of everybody else. Because old boss used to tell me, get your kids out the street. Number two is just being aggressive in high interest debt payoff. You got to pay out those high interest debts. I talk about in another video. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail in this video, but there's like a compounding effect that happens with your debt. And then you look at 20% credit cards. Where does that come? What does that become? Next thing I'll talk a little bit about is boundaries. I've been very open on this channel that I've had a lot of people in my life, a lot of people around me, a lot of people doing a lot of different things. And I had to learn how to set clear boundaries. But I set them with love because I realized that not everybody else's purpose is nefarious. They're just trying to do what they need to do. But I had to put boundaries around myself because as soon as we said we're going to retire, then it opened up, the lights went on or the ears went up of a bunch of other people that said, "Oh, okay, maybe they're doing okay." So I could come to them in case I have a challenge. And so we set up really clear boundaries in terms of how we manage it. It's funny because boundaries even line up to if we win the lottery because it's in some ways it's different, or in a lot of ways it's different. 150 million ways that is different. But it's still a question that you have to ask yourself is like, if I come into a situation, who am I going to help? Well, retirement's a situation, and to other people, it means something a lot different than it means to me. And I have to deal with that reality. And the last thing I'll say about this particular issue is that you just got to automate your savings. The less you think about it, the more you're going to do it. Do I need to say more? I don't spend a bunch of time on my bank accounts. I automate everything that needs to go out, and I look once a month to make sure that we're not in the red. And if we're not in the red, we're good to go. If we are, then I got to deal with my wife asking me why we're paying payments on things that we didn't buy. But automate your savings. Now, challenge number three, it's what I call healthcare and longevity risk. This is a big one because we don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know what kind of life we're going to live. We don't know any of those things as it relates to our health, but we do know that our health or our time is our only non-renewable resource. So we want to make sure we do something to at least address that risk. The fact of the matter is that over half of us fear outliving our assets. Most of us, when we look at, and I look at all the comments and all the conversations on these videos, people are concerned about, I don't want to outlive my assets. When you look at retirement balances of being between 40 and about $150,000, you start to think about how's that going to stretch. And when you think about today, I'm healthy today, but I go to the doctor for these things. So then 10 years from now, I'm healthy, I think I'm okay, but I'm going to have to go to the doctor for more. So then you have to manage that. That becomes the daunting piece when you look at the healthcare conversation, because right now, I feel good. I knew that I would, but you continue to go down, and it's the little things that happen, not the big things. So let's tackle this head on, because I think the answer that's going to give you at least the relative amount of peace as it relates to this is going to be around the proactive piece. So invest in your health now. Start going to the gym now. Don't wait. I'm waiting until next year, waiting until the new year, and waiting for somebody else to do it. Don't do that. And then if you have the opportunity to get involved in a healthcare savings account, healthcare savings accounts are great because, and I think I mentioned I was referring to them earlier in the video and I could have just waited, but they're tax deductible, they grow tax free, and the withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax free. And so this is really the trifecta. The other thing I'll mention is don't wait until you're 65 to start thinking about Medicare, or until you're 64 to start thinking about Medicare, because Medicare, think about this. Medicare is the one thing that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. So if you don't think about it up front, there's going to be a problem for you going from that point forward. And this is one of the few things in our lives that we have the ability to impact on the front end. So make sure that you take time to understand how it works, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, because you start thinking about things like long-term care, which I'll talk about in a second. And those all have an impact when you're 75, 85, 95, trying to figure this stuff out, because it was cool figuring it out in your 20s, but in your 70s, not so much. And the last thing I'll talk about as it relates to healthcare, just consider long-term health care insurance. I did a video about long-term care insurance and that the long-term healthcare, long-term care insurance, people have differing opinions. And the average time that a person is in a long-term care home is about 3 years. And so the question becomes, how do you cover those costs? And I talk about those, and we have insurance for us that covers those, so we have peace of mind. But not everybody's in the same situation. So my point here is going to be, just consider long-term care insurance. What is the potential for the need? What's your family history? Do you have dementia? Do you have people that you're confident are going to take care of you? Whatever the questions are, just consider it, because I couldn't be responsible to you without mentioning it to you, which is what I'm doing. And then finally, number 4 is what I call the confidence gap. That's that feeling of, am I going to get there because I started so late? Look, I am very open and honest in my videos that I thought I was the guy that had all the information, was on the right track. Then I got divorced, had to figure it out, had to pay for kids, had to care for kids, had to deal with all kinds of stuff. Then all of a sudden, at about 37, 38, I get my shit together, save some money, and my wife and I are able to retire. And I'm going to tell you that as a Gen Xer, this is nothing new, because you've been through the 2008 recession, been through COVID, you went through the dot-com bust. You lived a whole of your parents telling you that they were broke. And the fact is, they were broke. They were working for the ice company. They were working at laundromats. They were working at all these different places just to make ends meet. Places that now probably tell yourself, there's no way I go and work there. But your parents did. Why? Because that's what they had to do. That's what we grew up with. And so only about 15% of us feel like we've saved enough for retirement. So there's the confidence. We're not going to have that collectively. We're not going to have that confidence. But that's why I'm here, because I'm trying to lace you up with a little bit of game that's going to help you understand that even though you feel like, that's because you were part of a generation of parents who made it a point to tell you how far behind you were. So that way you got your ass caught up. And so now we're still caught up in that mix. It's weird. Some of us took the message and some of us went a different path. I took the message. So let me start with how we can kind of get after some of that anxiety, because I had to deal with it. And I realized early on that small steps have a big impact. You know, there's always the cliches that say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I'm not really a big fan of elephant. I'm just putting it out there in case you guys want to invite me for dinner or something. But no, I'm just kidding. But it's small steps. Small 1%. There was a point where I said, I'm going to start with 1% in my 401k. The next year, I'm going to go to 2% up until I got to the 6%. And all I put in was a 6%, because they matched me dollar for dollar up to 6%. Again, I'm sitting here now, I'm retired because the thought grows from that once you start. And then I had to reframe that late start as my prime earning years. I used to work with a guy named Sam Thayer. Sam told me one time, we were talking, we were both in our 30s, we worked together, whatever. Sam says, my prime earning years are going to be in my 40s and 50s. And when he said that, I was like, you come from a place that has a little bit of dough behind you. Me, that doesn't make any sense. Then I look back and I realized that that was my prime earning years. Here's the beauty of it is that Gen X right now, you're in your prime, or we are in our prime earning years. So take all that money that you're making, stop all the bullshit, and start spending some money and putting some money away on things that are going to help you down the road. Because I was telling a buddy of mine yesterday, it's weird because in your 50s, you're like, I feel like a bad motherfucker right now. Like, I'm that dude. 10 years from now, the world's not going to see me that way. The world's, I'm not going to have all these people looking at me like I have all this wisdom. I'm going to be that 60-year-old cat. So I'll be an older cat. So if I'm like the black George Clooney, then I might be cool there. But my point being that I'm going to be seen different. And in my 70s. So I've had 50 plus years of coming into this. And this is when the world starts pushing away. So you got to start thinking about the fact that you may not always make the same amount of money that you're making now, and that these are your prime years. And so you got to make sure that you manage your prime years and reframe this time from being a late start to being my prime years. The next one I'll mention is that you should get a financial checkup, get a checkup from the neck up. When I went to the financial advisor, I was floored. There was no way. My wife and I were talking about this the other day. There's no way I would have thought that I was going to be retiring at 51 based on my own perspectives and anything that I may have known or thought to be true at that period of time. And then I go talk to a financial advisor. He's like, man, you have no idea how far you are ahead of most people. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's funny, a quick story, and I know this is a long video, and I'm sorry if it's too long for you, but this is in a place right now. But I was talking to my mom after I got divorced one time. I was talking to my mom, and I said, I'm never gonna meet anybody. I'm not worthy. Nobody deserves to love me. All of that stuff, the pity party. My mom told me, she said, Sub, you're a lot further along than a lot of people. I said, no, no, I'm not further along. She says, you're college educated. You speak well. You got a good head on your shoulders. Your health is good. You have a great career. You make good money. She says, you're 90% ahead of most of the people that are out there in the world. And I thought to myself, to me, this seems normal because I'm always striving, but that's because I'm Gen X. But I think when you go and you talk to your financial person, if you've been striving for this up to this point, you may be further along than you might have thought you were. I found that people that overestimate their consequences or overestimate their position tend to underestimate, blow up a bunch of shit. And you don't want to deal with that. But then I find that people that underestimate to think they're not doing as well and then find out they're doing a lot better because they're doing all the work. So again, get that financial checkup. I know it was long, but it was important. Continue to educate yourself. I always say if anybody tells you they have the answer to be able to retire early, then find somebody else because, again, the answer is not that there is a universal answer. We all have unique circumstances, and we all need to take the time to understand our circumstances, understand what our needs are, and make the best decisions for us. And understand, do we need to take a part-time job in retirement? Do we need to take a side hustle? Do I need to drive for Uber? Do I need to do something a little bit different? But continue to educate yourself, continue to think about this stuff. Keep this stuff in your awareness because that's what's going to take you to where you need to be. And then always reevaluate your retirement age. I don't know if many of you know this, but and I may have mentioned it before, but I didn't think I was going to retire until I was like 58. And it turned out that every time I went and talked to my financial advisor based on the performance of our portfolio and all the other factors in our fighting debt, I went from retiring about 58 to 51. So to reevaluate that retirement age, because I think some of you may be pleasantly surprised based on the work that you're doing. Because again, if you're here, if you're on this channel, you're not here for entertainment. You're not here because somebody's going to be tap dancing for you. You're here because you're going to hear straight from somebody who actually did it. So, Gen X, we're resourceful. We've always figured it out. We're used to the ice cream man. We're used to getting paper routes. We're used to our bikes breaking and having to figure out how to fix a chain and figuring out who's going to have the extra link that we could use for our chain. And that's what we did. That is our generation. Everybody in our generation knows that layer of struggle because our parents struggled up until that point, and that's all they knew. And we didn't have any money. So my question for you then is, what's your biggest retirement fear? Now that you're sitting in Gen X, now that you're looking at the world in front of you, what's your biggest retirement fear? I think my biggest retirement fear is that the entire system blows up or something happens with my health. I don't think the system's going to blow up, and I try to keep myself fairly healthy. But what's your biggest fear? What are the things that you're thinking about? What are the things that keep you? I know healthcare is going to probably be one of them, but I think we have a path out for healthcare. But what about some of the other stuff? Let me know. Let me know what's going on with you. And I would also like to invite those of you that into the channel from time to time to subscribe to the channel. I put up videos twice a week as a regular thing on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And there's times that I put stuff up on Saturdays and I put stuff, it's just when the rhythm hits. Rhythm hits me, I got to put something up because the reality of our lives is that most of the stuff that we heard wasn't heard on a schedule. It was just heard because your uncle or your cousin or your brother, your sister, your mom, or your dad just decided to tell you something at that particular moment. You didn't know where that particular moment was. And so I try to make sure I give you information that hits at different particular moments. And if it works, cool. And if it doesn't, I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments because, at the end of the day, we're all in the same place and we're all trying to get to the same place and we're all trying to do the same things. We want to feed our family, we want to have a roof over our head, be able to eat what we want to eat and live a good life. So, that's why I always say that it's never my expectation that everybody retire early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. So, on that note, I'm going to cut this one off, but have a good rest of your day and I will talk to you soon.